Did you broadcast?
Yeah, we're broadcasting and recording, so you can start whenever.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Story Studio podcast. We're doing another one of our State of the Industry reports today. Today, we're talking to Alex Newton from K Lytics, which actually first of all, welcome, Alex, to the show.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm great to be here.
Thank you for joining us. We've actually never met, and we don't know why. It seems like we should have crossed paths in the various circle. I mean, it's not that big of a circle. But apparently Sean has a story about that. I'm curious.
Well, no, it's okay. So data.
I know what the story is.
Yeah, of course.
I'm wondering too.
Data is not something I dive deep into at all. In fact, I think there was maybe like a 2 or 3 year period where I didn't look in our dashboard even once because I wanted to be focused on what we're making instead of what we're selling, which isn't the right way to run a business, by the way. But
it's okay. It's halfway the right way to run a business.
It's halfway.
I actually just was like, oh gosh, just like, please don't say that publicly. That's horrible.
Yeah, well, no, but at the time, like I knew that Johnny checked on dashboards and stuff like that. But Johnny never cared about data the way Niamh cares about data. I mean,
no, I like to look at data, and if it looks good, I go, "That's awesome." And if it doesn't look good, I go, "That sucks." And I don't know what to do about it. I just kind of look at it and make it feel good.
Exactly. And so Niamh loves data, and Niamh came aboard as like a really passionate. I want to sell books. Like I want to sell books like nobody's ever sold books before. And for those of you, I don't know what order these are going to come out yet. So I don't know if you have heard us talk to Becca Syme yet or not. But if you have, then you know about our strength finders. And turns out Niamh's a little bit competitive, you guys. This is great for me because I'm not competitive, which I think makes me collaborative as much as I am, because I don't have to win. But somebody who wants to win at selling books, joining the company, yay! So we've been kind of completely remodeling, our marketing department over the last year, very steadily, constantly evolving it. I want to say this was about 3 or 4 months ago. Niamh says, do you mind if I get K Lytics? I'm like, no, why would I care? We're spending a ton of money on ads. Like I'm a big believer in you spend money on the things that help you to make more money, whether that's understanding data, knowledge base, creativity, whatever it is. So I'm like, of course. And Niamh says, well, that's great because I really miss it. Wait, what? What do you mean you really miss it? And she said, well, yeah, I used to subscribe. I used to subscribe. Now, here's what's funny about this. Niamh's never written a book yet. Like never published a book. So the idea that she was subscribing to like the geekiest data that she can get on the publishing industry, I think is just phenomenal. And so when we decided we were going to do this State of the Industry, of course, data and analytics is really important. But why we've never met is because it is a blind area for me. And our company is so much better now that we have somebody who it's not only not a blind area, it's an area of passion. Like girl likes her data. And I think that that's great. And so not only are we winning, the fact that we can look at data and evolve the way we create and sell books, but we can also have an interesting and lively conversation with the best data guy out there because Niamh speaks the language and does it with so much enthusiasm. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm really excited about this topic, and I'm super thrilled that we have Niamh to lead it.
Excellent. Well, that's a great introduction. And by the way, that's the whole purpose of data anyway, to spark discussion, right? To facilitate and not to paralyze people or, make them shy away. It's there to facilitate, and that's all. And if you look back in history, like medieval times, you have the arts, you have science, and where both come together, Leonardo da Vinci drawing these little sketches before it becomes the big work of art. I believe magic can happen, when both worlds meet.
Absolutely. And actually, one thing I'm really interested in, because yes, I've loved K Lytics. I've followed it for several years. And
before writing her book.
Yes. Well, I wanted to know, all the stuff that you can do, like by poking around, you can only go so far. Like you can only really say, okay, this is how well this particular genre is doing, or this is the kinds of covers that seem to be working well, and you only have your own impressions. And to me, that's not enough. That's telling me what I can find, not necessarily what's actually the reality of a genre. And as I think you guys probably know, I really like understanding what the lay of the land looks like in a genre, what kinds of covers people respond to, what kinds of pricing people are responding to, all that stuff. And all that stuff is really what K Lytics does. So Alex, I really want to know, how did K Lytics come into being? Because I think you're not an author, right? So where did you decide? Or
are you asking for an origin story?
Yeah. I just
Bitten by a radioactive
decide,
spider.
like, this is the area that I want to really dig into in terms of data analysis.
Well, it's a long story and a short story, and I tried to make it sort of in between, because how did I almost stumble into all of this? The truth of the matter is, I'm not an author. I'm a business person. Well, I'm a bit of an artist. I have a guitar here, but I don't write books, right? But the starting point was very much about 6 years ago. That's when we started. I was like still deep in the corporate world. I've seen it all: Fortune 500 companies, consulting world, all that, great stuff, where the thing that you think it's great. Well, I enjoyed that career for more than 20 years, but then my daughter by the time was like 3 years old, and it was this classic danger of running the risk of, at some point in time, your daughter asking you at the doorstep to show your ID card, to know who you are. So
my family still doesn't know who I am.
Yeah, there you go. But see, at that point in time, I remember vividly, I was in a really, excuse my words, shitty hotel, somewhere on a project, and, missing my family. And I thought, hey, I click always on these PayPal buy buttons. I always click on them. Why couldn't I work from home and others click on my PayPal buy button? So
that's the best question anyone asks online.
So that was the starting point. So at the time, I looked into various things, and that was right at the high time of this whole Kindle gold rush, where every John, Dick, and Harry thought you just upload your grandma's recipe book and you're going to be driving a Ferrari. So I fell for that, and I looked into Kindle publishing. I purchased one of these $19 get rich with Kindle type of things, and I was just totally fascinated by that gold rush, and joined the one or other Facebook group. And soon I noticed, being a data person, okay, there's a sales rank, and so what does sales rank 7,344 actually mean, in absolute terms? So I started talking to people. Long story short, I noticed there is a lot of good data on the Amazon platform if you care to look at it, but more so coming from a corporate background and data analytics background, I noticed, hey, once you start aggregating the data and monitor it over time, you really get into stories almost, right? And so I started sharing. I remember that. And by the way, at first it was called Kindle Lytics when I started out, and my lawyer said, you don't want to go into a legal, trademark dispute with Amazon on day one of your operation.
They might have better lawyers.
They might have better lawyers, but
you and Kindle boards.
And more of them. And let's be real, they're probably armed.
They probably aren't. But anyway, I thought, okay, but everything is done. The site is ready. The graphs are ready. Everything's ready. Kindle Lytics, there we go. So what do you do? Well, we just took out the Indle from the Kindle, and there you have Kindle Lytics. That's how it started out, and the rest is basically history. We started with covering categories, and people came, can you do subcategories, subcategories? And that's when it started, and I never looked back ever since.
And
I imagine...
Sorry,
I was going to say that before we get too far down the pipe here, I'm guessing that Niamh is going to delve into all sorts of detailed data questions and really get at the nuts and bolts. But just for overarching, in the case that somebody listening actually doesn't really know what K Lytics is, or has never subscribed or checked any of it out, can you just do like the 1,000-foot view?
Yeah, I mean, in very simple terms, you're an artist. and you want to write books. Now, it could be that you only write for therapeutic reasons. It could be that you actually want to write for the money, for the passion of the writing, anything. But what we basically facilitate is
You give a reason to never talk to your family. You forgot that one. That's Dave's.
or that one. And in case there's a little bit of money involved that you want to have, you know, or other currencies such as applause or being on bestseller lists.
That's Johnny.
You know, there are different currencies from money to recognition. So if you want to at least increase the odds of that, we look at market data to basically tell people what genres are trending, which ones are selling, which ones are not overly crowded, which ones are high priced, which ones are low priced. So to give you a bit of a foundation to basically marry your passion with the realities of a market out there. And we provide the data, basically market research reports for authors and publishers and agents to help you with that.
And when it comes to authors, how did people respond to K Lytics at the start? I'm just wondering, like, did they straight away, were people like really into the data, or did they just want to find like, what's the next hot niche, or what aspect of data were people responding to at the start?
I'd say there were two camps. The one camp was the Kindle gold rush type of, you know, authorpreneurs who were just, you know, tell me where the money is. I can hire ghostwriters and do anything. What, you know, I need paleo breakfast recipe books. Here we go. So these were the ones, and they were extremely interested in the data, but they soon became very, very disappointed in my data because my data showed there is no market at all for these guys, right? I mean, there is no money in nonfiction trash books whatsoever. There never was, never is, never will be, in my mind, looking at the facts of the data.
I think Dave just got a crush on you.
And can I ask you to clarify on that a little bit? Because I think that we see people chasing some of those things because, at least in their perception, there is money in it, and they must be doing something. You know, they're sort of screwing the pot, right? Like Kindle Unlimited pot, and they're just screwing everybody else or whatever, they're scamming. So what is the difference between your definition of the data doesn't support it and whatever their maybe short-sighted version of it's worth it for me sort of?
Well, I think one has to distinguish, obviously, the scammer type of businesses versus those guys who truly believe when they publish the 10 best habits to grow bonsai trees. And there are these types of books who believe that can make money. But very simply, if you look at the Kindle platform, you know, and look at the demographics of the Kindle and Kindle app owners, they're usually older people, mostly female. And they read, number one, romance, then mystery, thriller, suspense, and then sci-fi and fantasy, then a nonfiction in its entirety, fair enough, in its entirety though, and then, you know, a teen young adult, then some other genres. Now, once you dig into nonfiction, you know, the market breaks down into, you know, endless number of niches or niche markets. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, if you look into something like whatever, gardening and horticulture, you have 30,000 titles, and the average top 20 over the course of 3 years, you know, barely ranks in the 20,000s of the platform. So that is what I.
What if you have 1,000 books like that, Alex? Isn't that profitable?
No, because it isn't, because usually, especially in these type of niche markets, you know, yes, if you do have, you know, the number one title, and by the way, don't get me wrong, there is money in nonfiction, but it is usually a multi-channel endeavor. So you may have that one bonsai book and you're like the number one authority on bonsais, and your number one bonsai bestseller in the gardening and horticulture category proves that, but you make your money with courses, info products, you know, being in conferences. Scams, you know, yeah, there were scams, you know, click scams whatsoever. So that's the one side of it. And the other, by the way, there are titles, especially nonfiction, tend to be very sticky categories. So once you're in, there is chances you can, you know, remain in there with good reviews and some sales for a foreseeable future. And and the prices tend to be higher. So there is some money, but it's not the I get rich with a recipe book type of thing. And that's where my mission is, more to talk people out of publishing projects rather than into publishing.
Awesome.
It sounds more like a long-term play, if I could put words in your mouth. I mean, is there some of that to that maybe the data shows that money is in repeat buying, that sort of thing, or am I making that up?
I think I think the long term is not the qualifier that makes the market. It's very simple. It's the laws of supply and demand. If you allow my economics speech, there are 7 million English speaking titles out there. There are still 70,000 plus coming in every month. So the supply of book is growing by, still 15% per year or so, right? And I don't think the demand is at the same time. So the market, especially in these type of genres, nonfiction stuff, genres still gets flooded with, I just don't understand why somebody would insist on, but I too have something to say about the law of attraction. My book is the book. I know there's 20,000 out there, but
if I believe people will buy it, they will. I'm manifesting that.
Yeah, that's the best example, because really try to talk that author out of doing it.
Right. So I don't want to dismiss the idea is that there is money to be made in really good nonfiction content that adds value, that is unique, that brings something to the table. But the typical model of let's look at the outlines of the top 20 books out there, hire a ghostwriter to write the 21st book, and then go publish and put some ads, it's never going to work, never will.
So
well, I think nonfiction that tends to do great, and this is true with fiction also, it's what can you add to the conversation, right? So a nonfiction book from somebody who isn't an authority, who's kind of buying their authority, there's just no way. It's like it's the way SEO used to work versus the way SEO works now. You used to be able to fake your way through it, throw a couple of keywords around and rank. But now if you want that top spot in Google, and it's any subject people care about, you have to be one of the best in the world at answering that question to actually get the ranking. And I think that's true with nonfiction books now, and with fiction. What are you saying that's different than the other storytellers out there?
Well, first of all, fiction, if you look at Amazon as a channel, and I know there's always a discussion about Amazon, within Amazon, KU versus non-KU, we may touch upon that later, wide versus KU. But if you look at Amazon, obviously ebook, huge platform. And by the way, the ebook format, unlike what traditional publisher narrative wants to tell you, has still tremendously gained up to the very present point in time. By the way, also during COVID, ebook interest, basically doubled within a very short period of time.
So how many years do you think that it shaved off of? Because there's a natural trajectory, but it seems like COVID, we skipped a couple years.
Well, with COVID, there was, if we want to digress into COVID briefly, it was basically in the week of March 28th, when all the lockdown stuff came in. If you go on Google Trends and just put in coronavirus, you have this peak, I think, around March, a very steep spike in interest for this whole virus thing, and a very steep drop off also, by the way. Yeah, and you had 1 week later, you had the same spike on a different scale though, for ebooks. And basically once the lockdown was there, kids book interest on Google increased by tenfold during the lockdowns. Tenfold.
Yeah, that checks out.
and you did have all of a sudden, what we probably read when we were kids, or were read too, like the very hungry caterpillar, was like in the top 10 or something, even of Kindle. So pretty amazing stuff. So that happened quickly. Now, the ebook market always has this big inertia, what I call it. So while overall, virus interest goes up and down, ebook interest went up, and now it's, trickling down again back, and it's sort of back to normal levels, a bit higher. But what I was referring to was more a shift in formats, where if you look at the Amazon bestseller lists, they're not. There's the Kindle bestseller list, and there's the overall Amazon bestseller list. Now, the overall Amazon bestseller list, people think it is a print bestseller list because Amazon advertises that way. But once you click on a category, it's actually a cross-format book category, a cross-format book bestseller list. And we monitored it over 3 years, and basically in genres such as romance, mystery, thriller, suspense, especially romance, the top 100 overall, romance has like an ebook penetration now of 90%. You know, I think that's a pretty strong message that the traditional publishers would not tell you.
Wow, and so we took you off a little bit. You said that there was one camp of people back when you first started K Lytics who were into the data, and because they wanted to find out where's the money. So what was the other camp?
The other camp, very specifically, were those who are today our biggest clients, romance writers. So I was reaching out cold call to romance writers, you know, what you do in any new business, you know, probably they thought I was scamming them or spamming them, or first spamming, then scamming them. No, I was just reaching out and, you know, ask people, so what do you do in terms of market research when you write romance novels? And I got replies which were like, literally, what do you mean market research before I write something? It was more, and some even went further. They said, how do you even dare ask an artist, you know, to look at numbers before I write what I have in my mind? No offense taken. So
my Bigfoot porn is driven by art.
Right. So, but mind you, even Mozart was writing for the money, and for the money purely in some parts of his career. So it's, you know, there's legitimate laws. Long story short, there were some fiction authors who from the beginning looked at data, and mind you, many of very successful romance writers out there, they used to be real estate agents or corporate controllers in Fortune 500 companies before they now decided to write shapeshifter romance novels. So you have these people with very dual careers, and some of them, you know, have dealt with numbers all way long. But to answer your question, at the beginning, we had these purely money-oriented people. We had a lot of fiction writers who were sort of, okay. And then the middle ground who suddenly saw, oh my God, you know, numbers can help. If I want to run my indie business or hybrid business as a business person, you cannot do without looking at least some numbers. And my mission was always to make it some way fun and palatable, and that's where we are today.
Do you feel like there was some element of education that you had to do to the market to kind of teach writers why it makes sense to pay for data? Or do you find that the people who come to you, they know what they're doing? They're the more savvy anyway, and so they don't really need a pitch?
Very different audiences, to be honest. There is like the super savvy guys who say, you know, I just want this report in this category. And, you know, we have others who, you know, like Niamh, you know, never wrote a book before. And they say, let me first delve into this spreadsheet of 7,000 categories ranging from the bonsai trees to the you know.
Does anybody else want to write a book about bonsai trees?
No, I don't know why I belabor the point of bonsai trees.
Bonsai trees, I think.
I really feel like a bonsai tree story is in our future.
No, I don't know what this is here, but yeah. Anyway, so they're very different audiences from all backgrounds, all motivations. But I think they share one thing, which I think is the belief in, and that's my belief, there is no guarantee for success, right? If there was any tool, wisdom, approach, methodology, if they're marketing or scam or whatever, if there was anything.
You're saying analytics can't predict the future?
Futurelytics.
No, I insist we can predict the future, but I wouldn't tell anybody what I find, you know, only use it for my own purposes. But kidding aside, you know, we can only increase the odds of success. And, you know, if you go into a casino and play blackjack or poker, you know, if you are a bit good with the numbers, you cannot guarantee that you win, but you can increase the odds of success. And for many authors, they just feel if they have a bit of data, and just what you mentioned at the beginning, you know, if we show somebody, look, if you are into vigilante justice fiction, there's only 3 types of covers that sell. The first type, is this cliche. It captures 40% of the top 500 market. The next one is this cliche, which is a mashup of the guy, the silhouette, the dark silhouette of the guy running away. This makes 33% of the market. And then there is this other one using symbols, and that is another 33% of the market, and the rest does not sell.
Are you taking notes, Niamh?
It does give people a bit of a reassurance when they hire or coach or brief a cover designer. And for others, what we get at feedback, sometimes people love to also, even if they say, hey, that zombie thing, that was the big trend and I believe in it and I would have written it anyway, but if the data shows it's trending upwards, which by the way, it may not anymore, then they feel reassured in their writing, and writing with more confidence. It's like in sports. If you're more confident at what you do, the odds of success that you win are bigger.
How quickly do the trends that you see spiking crash? Like, can somebody capitalize on it in a timely way and still write a good book without just, throwing a bunch of crap out there? Or like, if it's already spiking, you may as well give up because that train's left the station.
So like Lit RPG, which, was all of a sudden super, super hot for a moment, right? I think Dave's question is, when do you get on that? When do you know to get on the train? Because by the time you produce something, it's already gone.
I see. Well, my overall answer to that question is always the ebook market, and within it, reader behavior is like a super tanker. It doesn't change over time. And I think the most extreme example is, I think the headline would be Vampires Never Die, right? So you have Twilight, you have the big blockbuster movie, I think 2008 or something. Five episodes of the Twilight series in the movie cinemas, and then there comes Bella Forrest, almost like 4 years into the game with her A Shade of Vampire series, which I think by now has 90 titles in the series. So she capitalized on it for 5 years.
That's an understatement.
Which is an understatement. Well, then she went off, and by the way, very smartly, I don't know whether she did it consciously or in a team or just, felt like it. Well, then she jumped onto this whole gender discussion, which, started going on like 3-4 years back, and all of you have gender games. And now, and that's why I say Vampires Never Die, you have the Harry Potter readers who've grown up. Now, she did decide not to jump onto that, whatever, Academy romance bandwagon, but she, goes back to her roots, and there's Harley Merlin as a series. So we're 10 years into the trend, and she's still capitalizing on the vampire. So vampires never die. Billionaires never die either, right? So you have the shades of vampire blockbuster movie, and all of a sudden, to the very present day, it used to be that women were really looking for, you kiss a millionaire, and today is you want to get whipped by a billionaire. So the theme...
That's just called escalation, Alex.
It's just...
They do that with my vigilante crossover.
It's an escalation of the theme, but it's still there. Having said this, even some trends that people say, but that's extremely short-lived. Take things like reverse harem, right? The whole trend already started like 4 or 5 years ago on the back of this big hype and popularity of the Korean and Japanese reverse harem mangas and anime movies, right? So only some then urban fantasy writers picked up the trope and, hit something with it. I think by now the space is getting crowded. Now they came then with Academy romance, and there are other spikes. But to answer your questions, these trends are not 3 months. And just to drive the story home, what I found extremely interesting, 4 years ago, we made our first cozy mystery and annual report. So we looked into classic cozy mystery, culinary and animals, cats, dogs. And there already back then you had, the known players who did these witch cozy mystery type of things. So paranormal cozy mystery. A year later, and that was like the #1 subgenre or sub niche in cozy mystery 4 years ago. A year later, we thought, let's redo the report. The result was the same. Paranormal cozy mystery, clearly #1. A year later, the same. a year later, the same. Now it seems to getting a bit more crowded, and some of the known authors and some of the urban fantasy chaps go into, let's invent something new, paranormal women's fiction. All right. So you see the trends are evolving, but some are reader driven, some are entertainment industry driven, and some are even author driven. But I would say once you jump onto a bandwagon, the trains come and go, not at like 30 minutes intervals. It's longer periods of time.
So is it more like when there's some trend where it's obviously, okay, there's going to be a lot of traffic in this new genre, what you see is a lot of prospectors, right? They're going out, they're getting their pans, they're dipping it in, looking for gold, but they're not really meant for that genre. So they fade away. And then the people who like the genre survives because the people who are supposed to be reading or writing in that genre are now writing in it. And so there's enough, like it's more crowded in the beginning because too many people are there, but then it kind of evens out. So you have a nice match between the amount of readers and the amount of writers. Is that kind of
I think that's actually a very fair and a very important, a very good point. So for example, when we look at some of these trend reports over, now it's the 5th edition, we always have this not authoritative ranking of authors in any way, because we only take snapshots. We don't, monitor like that one genre or author like every day, every year in, year out. But it gives you a bit of a feel of what the market is at a point in time, and then a year later, and then a year later. And an interesting observation is that if you look at that ranking of authors, like often half of the names were already in the list a year before, and a year before. So it's exactly what you mentioned. Those who love that genre, who have the passion, and who are in there for the long term, they then also have the benefit of ultimately reaping the longer term fruits of that genres, having built their fan base and being in there for the long haul.
And
How do you suggest people? Go ahead, Niamh.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of how an author then is using data, there's obviously the short term and the long term. What things should they consider when they're looking at the data in terms of making those kinds of short term, long term decisions? Is it different? If they're like
very much
right now versus the long term?
And before you answer, if I could add a piece to this, because this is actually very similar to what I was going to ask, is I think that there's a way to use data that could be detrimental either to you as the author or to the community in general, because you're just chasing trends as opposed to creating good fiction. Like if there is a polarity there where you can find a happy medium, but then there are people who are purely like, well, I don't really give a shit about billionaire romance, but that's hot right now, so I'm going to abandon everything, I'm going to do it, and then the readers aren't happy and they aren't happy. So I mean, same question as Niamh, basically. How would you suggest using the data? And it's okay if it's what I just said too, even though I said it kind of disparagingly.
I'm 150% with you on that one. So if we first take the timeline, say long-term versus short-term, I think the typical long-term questions are about what to write, and the shorter-term questions are more about, how to market what you've written, right? So, and the data for each of those questions, there are some overlap, but there's different. So on the longer term, you may look at the points we discussed before, what things are trending up, what are trending down. A very important measure is how much demand is out there versus how crowded is the thing already. And then there is more nuances, such as, is it a high price or low price thing? Because you must be aware, obviously, that if you get into the romance game, it is more a mass market type of thing, high churn, high turnaround. You have to be a very prolific writer to be in that type of genre. If you are into the epic fantasy trilogy, that may be a bit of a different type of approach. So that is a longer term question. And let's jump right into what you said, Johnny, on that longer term question. I always say, never ever use data in isolation. Use it as something to facilitate. But facilitate what? Other important question. And I always say this whole right to market thing, or whatever people want to call it, I always say, first park the data. Don't even look at the data, but look at, what is it that you love and, love to read and write yourself, and imagine yourself doing so 5 years down the road. So if you think Amish romance is that, big hot thing at a point in time, but you cannot conceive yourself of writing Amish romance for the next 7 years to come, then don't. Yeah, because
You hear
you
that,
won't
Dave? Don't.
don't. So that's question number one. Question number two, I always ask, well, list all the genres where you have a particular subject matter knowledge. Where can you write with credibility in an authentic way, right? So that applies for fiction and nonfiction. So where do you have something to add? Take the military romance writer whose son works as a Navy SEAL and tells mom, the writer, all the classified information, and thus, you can write very good Navy SEAL stories. So that's or take legal thrillers. If you don't know the legal system, don't try to compete with the Grishams of the world. And the third question is, well, do you have the craft skills for that genre in question? Because some genre in question may require you to be able to write steamy scenes.
And now Bonnie's firmly on your side. You've checked all of our boxes.
Fast-paced action, epic world building, whatever it is. But once you have a yes on all those three, then you may look, okay, which of the genres I listed here in my little exercise, where does the numbers show that if I go a little bit this way, the odds of success are higher than the other way? So Johnny, I'm totally with you. Don't just jump for the trend. It may work, perhaps even financially, but are you going to be happy with it as a writer and as an artist? I don't know. Probably not. And odds of success, I don't know. And lastly, your question about short-term data. So that's then more tactical. Price levels. Are all the other books selling at what price point? What are the promotional price points typical in the genre? What are the high selling, low selling covers? These sort of questions. Then we get into keywords, metadata, categories, all the boring stuff, right? So,
all the good stuff.
or the good stuff. To some, it's the good stuff.
So this being the state of the industry, I want to know, and this might be a really tough question, because I know you really dig into the details, but have you seen anything emerge overall in the 6 years that you've been collecting data about Amazon and about what authors are doing, and I'm just kind of wondering, how have things changed, or have you seen any patterns emerge that can kind of give us an overview, an overall view into what's happening in the industry?
Well, it is a tough question, but if we take it like a bit piece by piece, I think there are some trends that are supplier driven, so like Amazon driven, right? And if we just do the 30 seconds history, I think obviously the first big make break point was 2014 when Kindle Unlimited 1.0 was introduced. All of a sudden you had a subscription scheme, and many people just scream, how can you buy books with a subscription? We now have Netflix in books. And I think there was an uproar, but soon some people noticed that you can make money with it. That's when you had the first wave of scammers who basically had all these super short books, and you got paid a full price if people then read 10% of it, or so it was. So then you had the evolution with the obviously paper page, the Kindle Unlimited 2.0. Within like 4 weeks time, you had, by the way, the scammers then revert their scheme and, produce extremely long books.
They're always faster than the artists.
They're always faster than the artists, and they put a table of
pages on bonsai.
Exactly, 50,000 pages with the best Japanese sushi recipes in the back of the book and a good clickbait in the page 1 table of content to go to the back of the book. Then they had 3.0. So I think there was this whole Kindle Unlimited thing. Now, what's interesting is a trend now where writers, the supplier, Amazon, and readers come together is what we did look at. We looked at the share of Kindle Unlimited titles in the top 100 bestseller lists across all those categories over a 3-year period. And the fact of the matter is that Kindle Unlimited is gaining share and is gaining share and is gaining share and is gaining share. So that, for example, is one trend. I think the the dominance of series in many genres has become another, and sometimes these trends are also interlinked. I think last time, I think the top 100 cozy mystery, there's, I think, virtually like 0 books that are not part of a series, right? So Amazon going into then publishing themselves, if you look at the market shares of the Montlakes, Lake Unions, Thomas and Mercer, has grown a lot. So it's really two forces, I think, on Kindle right now. One is the indies or hybrids, and the other is the Amazon imprints that are happening. And I think the fourth big one we've seen is the continued basically squeeze of print between the ebook format and the audio format that happened, especially over the last 3 years across the top 100 bestseller lists. And that, I think, where the traditional publisher narrative agrees with what we monitor or Amazon would argue is the growth in audio, but they would not agree on the growth of ebooks. Unless you look at their quarterly reports, the first quarterly report in the Corona or COVID-19 crisis, where all of a sudden the big CEOs of traditional publishers boast their big growth in ebook sales. So after 3 years of ebooks are dead, it's a bit of an odd phenomenon.
Okay, another question about the sort of state of the industry. Do you feel like it's because authors often have this sort of sky is falling, everything is getting worse, that kind of thing. So I'm just wondering, from a data perspective, do you think that supply is outstripping demand? Because that's certainly the perspective that a lot of the authors seem to take.
I think it is, frankly. I think it is because but I don't think that everything is doom and gloom. And although I'm depressed all the time thinking about the data, it is basically what is happening. The influx of titles in many genres is still double-digit growth a year of supply. And I think everybody, even if you believe in continued, very good growth of the ebook market, I think nobody will argue that the number of readers, the number of pages, read across the globe, increase in double-digit numbers. So there is something to the whole thing continually is getting more competitive just by these laws of supply and demand. But there were also new chances being created. Now, to some say it's a threat, but if you look at the Kindle Select Global Fund as an example, I think last month it was, 32.3 million or something. So Amazon by now is paying out in royalties $1 million a month, right, to authors out there. Now, for the individual author who sees his or her KENPC drop by 8% from 1 month to the other, in your microcosm, if you will, you think, oh my God, what's happening there? And I'm losing money. That's not good. But from a helicopter point of view, I think we've now had 76 months of the Kindle Select Global Fund. And out of these 76 months since 2014, I think it's 67 months that fund grew on a month-by-month basis.
Wow.
So, and I think that says something. And even by now, we project that by the end of the year, it will have grown another 7 or 8% over the year before. So there's no year without that Kindle Unlimited growth. Although I totally agree with you, to the one individual author who has another ad campaign failing either on Facebook or, not getting the cost of advertising covered on Amazon, sometimes things can feel pretty dire, and no doubt about that.
So you mentioned KU and the trend there that's growing. So let's talk about KU versus wide. What does the data say? Like, in terms of, does it make more sense for people to go more toward KU or not? Or is there a certain kind of author? What's it say?
Well, first of all, we only monitor the Amazon data. So I don't have data on Kobo or, the other platforms from a, fact point of view. But what I can say on the Amazon side is, first of all, it's growing. It's increasing in share. And by the way, the reason behind it, we suspect, and I had also a great discussion with Dave Chesson on a conference on it, is it's not that Amazon manipulates the algorithm in any way, but from a buying psychology point of view, you have that one button, which is like read for free. And, a paid book is you have to pay something. Now, once you've paid a subscription, you feel like it's a free download. So, which of the buy buttons is going to convert better? In the long run, it's going to be those that almost look like a free download, which is the KU books. And since both the downloads and the full purchases drive sales rank in the same way, you almost have like a self-fulfilling prophecy that Kindle Unlimited over time is just, taking more and more share in those bestseller
one way
lists.
authors can easily plug into this to kind of understand the behavior is Netflix. I think probably 9 out of 10 people listening to this subscribe to Netflix. And it used to be you rented a movie on Friday night, right? You went to Redbox or you went to Blockbuster or whatever, and you paid out of pocket. And you can still do that. There's stuff on Apple or Prime all the time that you could just rent, Google Play, whatever. But most people, because they're already paying their Netflix or whatever their streamer is, they're going to see what's there.
Exactly.
Like it's movie night. I'm going to see what new things have dropped on HBO because I pay for HBO every month. So why not? And I think that it's that same exact behavior. I already pay for this. There's got to be something good.
Yeah, I don't even turn on Prime to check for stuff because it mixes stuff that's free.
Yes, right.
It's stuff that's paid. So I'm like, I don't want to see this. I just want to see what can I watch right now.
Right. So that is one part, but then I think it's very important to look at individual genres. So what we also started doing is we looked at, we cannot like fully tell like what is the demand and share, although for some genre reports we now looked at what is the share of Kindle Unlimited from the demand. But for all 7,000 genres, we very simply started looking at what percentage of the book supply. So and for the growth in supply is KU versus non-KU. And I think here the language is very clear that there are just some genres which are like, on whatever, 70% KU. So there seems to be something in KU, whilst other genres you have only 10% of publishers and books going into KU. So I think there is also a very important point of genre selection, whether you find your readers on the Kindle Unlimited platform or not. Oh my God, we get a hailstorm here right now outside of the window. And then I think the last thing is, how many platforms can you master? And I think that's an important question for an indie publisher. It doesn't have like a big marketing team or any marketing team for that matter. It's about, are you mastering Amazon ads and Facebook ads and Google ads? Are you master of Kobo, Amazon, Apple? So how much can you actually put on your plate to be really good at it? And I think that's another argument for how to choose between wide and not wide. Next to probably many other criteria that are out there, which we haven't even scratched upon.
So what do you feel like is coming next in terms of the industry? What do you think the future will look like if we can make you tell us your future predictions?
Or your future lytics, Alex.
The future lytics. I think there won't be so much change, to be honest. I don't see like the big revolution. I see just a evolution. And if I look at evolution, there's a couple of things. I mean, look at reader demographics. I mean, there are some genres, which I found an interesting exercise. If you go on Facebook Audience Insights, which not many people use, especially since some of the interests you can put in there are, very crude. But for some genres, it works. And if you put in like Facebook Audience Insights Cozy Mystery, you get immediately this graph of the demographics of the readers with, I think, 91% female and age 55 years and older, right? And I think one big thing where I'm anxious to see how is that COVID-19 panning out, because with the kids having been at home, with all the homeschooling, all of a sudden kids got their iPad and, you know, the Kindle Fire.
Yeah, they've been a much slower transition, but I think that's what we were talking about earlier. I feel like this shaved a few years off of that transition.
Right. So all of a sudden, you know, and there's only so much Netflix you can watch or your parents allow you to watch. What we did find that some of the teen young adult genres, the bestseller list, you know, increased quite drastically in ranking. So there was some indication that kids, especially teens, read more, you know, during this crisis, and the device they used was usually not the print book, but the electronic device. So I think a big question for the whole industry is, you know, will young people, you know, is there a next generation who is used to reading books, which in whichever shape or form? This may sound very cliche, but I think that is a very important thing to monitor, because otherwise your readers are simply going to die out, right? You know, if you don't have
well, it's a thing to keep an eye on, because if you tell stories will never go anywhere. So if all of a sudden books start to wither on the vine, as storytellers, okay, what is hot? Oh, audio dramas or video game narratives or whatever it is. Get good at that kind of storytelling.
And you know, I don't look into all these tech platforms in detail, but for example, I've been in touch with some tech platform here. You know, I'm German, I live in Switzerland, but you know, I lived in Germany until last year. There's, you know, was a startup, and they just got financed with $15 million, and basically what they came up with is an app, and you know, the stories are published on an app, but the rendition is not narrative text. Some of the stuff is almost like in chat format, you know, so the dialogues would be like in chat format, and you all of a sudden, I would never ever, you know, consume a story neither in that format or in that type of, you know, piece by piece type of thing. But you know, they got a $50 million financing, so you go like,
I imagine it works for the teenage mind really well.
Yeah, well, I think there's going to be a lot of experimenting like that. But if we saw like Quibi, right, like that lasted like an hour and a half, because this is how people want to consume entertainment now. They're always on their phones, and people are like, yeah, no.
Exactly. So, but you know, back to your question, what are we going to see? I think the trend has already started, but the big question is, are we going to I've been in many industries, you know, as a corporate consultant, and almost any industry from automotive to toothpaste to you name it, you have this never ending trend of ongoing consolidation in a industry, right? So the smaller buys the big one buys the smaller company, until you have almost like a monopoly at the very end, or you know, an oligopoly at the end of the evolution. Take the car industry. Now, indie publishing has totally fragmented the scene, but if you look at any page of the Amazon search results, up until a year ago, you had this nice gallery view that on a desktop you could click on. So you had like 60 books per page. They abolished the gallery view. It's now only a list page view of 16 books and a brand at the top, at least if you're on a desktop or a tablet, I think, for that matter. And out of these 17 positions, 7 are sponsored results. So 42% of the page is basically a pay-to-play endeavor for the author or publisher. Now, if that is not going to drive a shakeout or a consolidation industry, I don't know what will. But I truly believe that is going to be. Will there be chances for new authors, new talent? Always. I mean, we're in the arts industry. There will always be new talent and new. But
your
people.
Skill set does have to evolve, and your knowledge base has to evolve. Your understanding of the way it all works needs to grow with the industry.
Totally. But I think over the next years, it will be very interesting to see how you have teams of authors, smaller companies, you know, taking over more share again from this extremely fragmented indie author base. So I think there is also going to be some consolidation in that field. For that's
Like
at least one of the
collaborative
predictions I would bet on.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. So I have one question before we wrap up. Is there any universal takeaway that you would say, whether you are just starting out and starting to dig into data, or you've been doing it for a long time, looking at the data, is there a universal truth that you can mine and kind of general advice for everyone?
Yeah, I think my general advice would be, even if you are a author or a person for that matter who hates math, don't shy away of looking at some market data, because if you are into your career, whatever your currency is, dollars or recognition, you want to know how to earn that currency. And especially your creativity is probably the most precious resource you have.
Thank you.
your creativity and your time, right? To manifest that creativity into a product, in your case, a story and a book. And I just hate seeing authors waste that resource. And I think the universal takeaway of 6 years doing is I think it's equally as good to know what to write as well as what not to write. And in both ways, data can help you and really prevent you from wasting your precious time, energy, and resource and creativity on things that may never fly or have extremely low odds of success. And by the same token, may help you steer your creative efforts a bit into that direction where, there may be more readers out there where your story resonates with.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. Boy, I could keep asking questions. This is one of those episodes that just kind of is bottomless. I do really liked it. I just don't like it in the same fingers in it way that Niamh does. So thanks so much for being on, Alex. If anybody wants to check out K Lytics, which you should, I actually wasn't totally aware of the pricing just because of the way the company's set up, but I went and I looked and I went, oh, that's cheap. So k-lytics.com is in analytics. And anything else that you want to let people know about?
Well, there's also tons of free content. Check out klytics.com/blog. And if you have questions, we're an outfit. You can always also reach me personally if you write to support@k-lytics.com and put attention Alex, or, this was the podcast such and such. It will be routed to me, and I'll try to answer to the best of my knowledge. If you have questions or need assistance, don't hesitate to reach out. It's a very personal thing we have with our clients and authors,
Fantastic. And I've heard nothing but good things on that front. So
and I'm going to be emailing you about bonsai trees later.
Please do. I haven't told everything about this story.
He's got an epic fantasy bonsai tree series he's gonna do. The wizards have to trim them by magic. All right. So thanks so much for being on, Alex. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye for now.
Thank you.